The stray cat waited every night, even after the old man suddenly disappeared. The fluorescent lights of the McKinley Tower lobby buzzed with a faint, almost mournful hum. Mr. Arthur Harris, a man sculpted by time and routine, stood behind the security desk, his gaze fixed on the monochrome display of the security monitors. He wasn't a large man, not anymore. Time, and perhaps a lifetime of quiet meals eaten alone, had softened his edges, leaving him with a gentle stoop and a face etched with the map of a life lived mostly in the margins. His shift at the McKinley Tower, a relic of the 1970s that somehow still held a few stubborn tenants, was a predictable dance. Check the doors, monitor the cameras, log the occasional late-night worker, and, most importantly, maintain the silence. Arthur Harris excelled at silence. It was a comfortable companion, a shield against a world that often felt too loud, too demanding. He'd been with the building for nearly 20 years. He'd seen businesses come and go, witnessed the slow decline of the once bustling downtown area of Richmond, Virginia. The city outside had changed, morphed, and grown restless. But inside the McKinley Tower, time seemed to slow, trapped in the amber of its outdated decor and the quiet rhythm of Arthur's patrols. Every night at precisely 10:30 p.m., after the last straggling employee had shuffled out, Arthur would begin his final ritual. He'd retrieve his worn, brown leather lunch bag from beneath the desk. Inside, nestled beside a thermos of lukewarm coffee, was a small, dented tin of rice and a small, unopened bottle of cheap rice wine. He'd walk out the back entrance, past the loading docks and the overflowing dumpsters, to a small, cracked concrete bench nestled beside the parking lot. He'd sit, the chill of the evening air seeping through his thin uniform jacket, and unscrew the cap of the rice wine. The aroma, sharp and faintly sweet, would drift into the night. He'd pour a little into his hand, and then he'd wait. He never had to wait long. A flicker of movement in the shadows, a pair of luminous green eyes reflecting the distant glow of a streetlight. The ginger cat, a scrawny, battle-scarred veteran of the alleyways, would emerge. It never came close, maintaining a respectful distance, its body low to the ground, a posture of cautious anticipation. Arthur would place a small portion of his rice on the ground, a few feet from the bench. The cat would watch, unblinking, until Arthur had settled back on the bench. Then, with a cautious grace, it would approach the offering, eating quickly but deliberately, its eyes never leaving Arthur. This had been their routine for years. A silent communion between a lonely man and a solitary creature. A shared moment of peace in the harsh landscape of the city night. Arthur never spoke to the cat, not in words. But there was an understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of shared existence that passed between them. He'd finish his meager dinner, the cat would finish its portion, and then, just as silently as it had arrived, it would melt back into the shadows. Arthur would watch it go, a faint ache in his chest that he couldn't quite name. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. Perhaps it was the echo of a loneliness that ran deeper than he cared to admit. He would pack up his lunch bag, take one last look at the empty space where the cat had been, and return to the silent, empty building. The routine was complete. The night was his, and the cat, he knew, was out there somewhere surviving. The ginger cat, known to no one by any particular name, had been born in the tangled undergrowth behind a shuttered diner 3 blocks from the McKinley Tower. He was one of a litter of 5, a mewling, scrambling mass of fur and instinct. His mother, a fierce calico stray, had taught them the harsh lessons of survival. The rumble of approaching cars, the scent of danger, the desperate scramble for scraps. He'd seen his siblings disappear, one by one. One, a tiny black kitten, had been scooped up by a giggling child, a fate that seemed both terrifying and strangely appealing. Another had vanished after a rainy night, its small body never found. The others had simply drifted away, drawn by the siren call of the wider, dangerous world. He alone had remained, drawn to the relative safety and the predictable rhythm of the alley behind the McKinley Tower. The dumpsters, though often raided by raccoons and other larger cats, sometimes yielded treasures. Discarded sandwiches, half-eaten cartons of Chinese takeout, the occasional glorious find of a whole fish head. Life was a constant struggle. He'd learned to dodge the kicks of late-night revelers, to avoid the territorial sprays of rival toms, to endure the gnawing hunger that was his constant companion. He'd been caught in a dog fight once, a terrifying blur of teeth and claws that had left him with a permanent limp and a deep-seated fear of anything canine. He'd learned to be invisible, a shadow among shadows. He'd learned to trust no one. Humans, for the most part, were a source of either indifference or outright cruelty. He'd been pelted with stones, chased with brooms, and sprayed with hoses. He'd learned to keep his distance, to observe from afar, to expect nothing but pain or neglect. Then, one night, he'd smelled the rice wine. It was a new scent, unfamiliar but intriguing. He'd crept closer, cautiously, his senses on high alert. He'd seen the man, sitting quietly on the bench, his posture unthreatening. He'd seen the small offering of food, placed with a gentleness that was utterly foreign to his experience. He'd hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to flee. But the hunger was a powerful force, and the man's stillness, his lack of aggression, was oddly reassuring. He'd taken a tentative step, then another. He'd eaten the rice slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The man hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't tried to touch him. He'd simply watched, his eyes, in the dim light, seeming to hold a glimmer of something. It wasn't pity, not exactly. It was something softer, something that resonated with the cat's own quiet solitude. And so the routine had begun. Night after night, the cat returned, drawn by the scent of rice wine and the promise of a small, safe meal. He still didn't trust the man completely. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But he recognized him, recognized his scent, his movements, his quiet presence. He recognized him as different. The cat had no concept of time, no understanding of days or weeks. His life was measured in the cycle of hunger and satiation, of darkness and light. But he knew, in his own way, that the nightly ritual with the quiet man had become a fixed point in his precarious existence, a small island of stability in a sea of uncertainty. He knew it was the only good time in his life. Arthur Harris lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a faded brick building a few miles from the McKinley Tower. It was a place of quiet echoes, filled with the ghosts of a life that had never quite blossomed. The furniture was old, inherited from his parents, worn but meticulously cared for. The walls were bare except for a single, framed photograph of a smiling young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, his late wife, Sarah. He'd met Sarah at a church social, a shy, awkward encounter that had somehow blossomed into a love that was both deep and enduring. They'd married young, full of dreams and hopes for a future that, sadly, had been cut short. Sarah had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer just 5 years after their wedding. The battle had been swift and brutal, leaving Arthur a widower at the age of 30. He'd never remarried. The grief had settled deep within him, a quiet ache that never fully subsided. He'd thrown himself into his work, finding solace in the routine, the predictability, the lack of emotional demands. The McKinley Tower had become his refuge, a place where he could exist without having to confront the emptiness of his personal life. He had no close friends, no family nearby. His parents had passed away years ago, and he'd lost touch with most of his childhood acquaintances. He was a man adrift, a solitary ship sailing through a fog of quiet loneliness. His days off were spent mostly in his apartment. He'd read mostly history books and biographies, losing himself in the lives of others. He'd watch old movies on television, the flickering images providing a temporary escape from the silence. He'd cook simple meals, always making enough for two, a habit he couldn't quite break, even though the second plate remained untouched. He'd sometimes sit by the window, watching the world go by, feeling a pang of longing for a connection he couldn't quite define. He'd see couples walking hand in hand, families laughing together, and he'd feel a sharp twist of envy, a reminder of what he'd lost, of what he'd never have again. He wasn't unhappy, not in the conventional sense. He'd simply accepted his solitude, his quiet existence, as his fate. He'd built a wall around his heart, a protective barrier against the pain of loss and the fear of further disappointment. The nightly ritual with the ginger cat was, perhaps, the only crack in that wall. It was a connection, however tenuous, to another living being. It was a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone, that there was still some small measure of kindness and compassion left in the world, even in the darkest corners of a forgotten alley. It reminded him of his own emotions. He often wondered about the cat, about its life, its struggles. He imagined it battling the elements, dodging dangers, searching for scraps of food. He felt a strange kinship with the creature, a shared understanding of the harsh realities of survival. He never considered taking the cat home. His apartment building didn't allow pets, and besides, he wasn't sure he was capable of caring for another living being. He'd failed Sarah in his own mind by not being able to save her. He didn't want to risk failing another creature, to inflict his own loneliness on another soul. But the thought, however fleeting, had crossed his mind. And with each passing night, as he watched the cat disappear into the shadows, the ache in his chest grew a little stronger, the wall around his heart a little weaker. The news came on a Tuesday, delivered with the cold efficiency of a corporate execution. Arthur was called into the office of Mr. Peterson, the building manager, a man whose perpetually sour expression seemed to have been permanently etched onto his face. "Arthur," Peterson began without preamble, "we're downsizing." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Arthur felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He'd seen this happen before to other employees, to other businesses. He'd always assumed he was safe, a fixture, a part of the building's unchanging landscape. He'd been wrong. "We're consolidating security operations," Peterson continued, his voice devoid of any warmth or empathy. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." Arthur stared at him, speechless. The words seemed to echo in the small, sterile office, bouncing off the walls, mocking his stunned silence. He felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of nausea, a dizzying sensation that threatened to knock him off his feet. "We appreciate your years of service," Peterson added, as an afterthought, handing him a thin, white envelope. "This contains your final paycheck and information about severance." Arthur took the envelope, his hand trembling. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew what it contained. The end of his routine, the end of his purpose, the end of his connection to the world. He walked out of the office in a daze, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him, now sounding like a death knell. He gathered his few belongings from his locker, his movements mechanical, his mind numb. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no one to say goodbye to. He walked out of the McKinley Tower for the last time, the heavy glass doors closing behind him with a final, echoing thud. He stood on the sidewalk, the city noise swirling around him, feeling lost and adrift, a small boat tossed on a stormy sea. He didn't go to the bench that night. He couldn't. The thought of facing the empty space where the cat usually waited, the thought of breaking their silent routine, was too much to bear. He went straight home, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand, the weight of his future pressing down on him. The cat, however, waited. It emerged from the shadows at the usual time, its keen senses detecting the familiar scent of rice wine, even though it was fainter than usual, lingering in the air like a ghost. It waited patiently, its body low to the ground, its eyes fixed on the alley entrance. Minutes ticked by, stretching into an hour. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the nearby trees, carrying the scent of rain. The cat remained, unwavering, its fur ruffled by the breeze, its ears twitching at every sound. It didn't understand why the man hadn't come. It didn't understand the concept of layoffs, of downsizing, of corporate decisions that could shatter lives. It only knew that the routine had been broken, that the one constant in its precarious existence had vanished. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the cat finally retreated, seeking shelter beneath a pile of discarded cardboard. It curled up, its body shivering, its stomach empty. The rain fell harder, washing away the last traces of rice wine, washing away the hope of a shared meal, of a shared moment of peace. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray days and sleepless nights. Arthur retreated into his apartment, the walls closing in on him, the silence amplifying his despair. He didn't answer the phone, didn't open the mail, didn't leave the apartment except for the occasional, reluctant trip to the grocery store. The severance pay dwindled quickly. He'd always lived frugally, but unemployment was a different beast. The bills piled up, the notices from the landlord became increasingly threatening. The fear of eviction loomed large. He tried to find another job, but his age and his lack of specialized skills were insurmountable obstacles. He filled out countless applications, attended a few humiliating interviews, only to be met with polite rejections or, worse, condescending pity. He stopped reading, stopped watching television, stopped cooking. He ate sparingly, mostly canned soup and crackers, his appetite gone, his body mirroring the slow decay of his spirit. He spent hours staring out the window, watching the world go by, feeling increasingly detached, increasingly invisible. He thought about Sarah, about their life together, about the dreams they'd shared. He thought about the cat, about its unwavering loyalty, its quiet presence. He felt a pang of guilt, a sharp stab of remorse for abandoning it, for breaking their unspoken agreement. He considered going back to the McKinley Tower, just to see if the cat was still there. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. The shame was too great, the fear of facing his failure too overwhelming. He was afraid of what he might see, afraid of the emptiness, afraid of the cat's accusing eyes. He started drinking more, the cheap rice wine providing a temporary escape from the crushing weight of his despair. It numbed the pain, blurred the edges of his reality, allowed him to drift into a hazy, forgetful sleep. He knew he was spiraling downward, caught in a vortex of depression and hopelessness. He knew he needed help, but he couldn't bring himself to ask for it. He was too proud, too ashamed, too accustomed to his solitude. He'd become a ghost in his own life, a shadow haunting the empty rooms of his apartment, a reflection of the forgotten man he'd always been. He was disappearing, fading away, piece by piece, and he didn't know how to stop it. He felt he no longer belonged to this society. One particularly cold evening, as he sat staring out the window, watching the first snowflakes of winter begin to fall, he saw a familiar figure scurrying across the street. It was a ginger cat, its fur matted and dirty, its body thin and frail. It wasn't his cat. He knew that, but the sight of it triggered a wave of emotion, a surge of guilt and regret that washed over him, leaving him trembling and breathless. He realized, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that he couldn't continue like this. He had to do something, anything, to break free from the suffocating grip of his despair. But the thought of facing the world, of facing his failure, was still too much to bear. He closed the curtains, blocking out the sight of the snow, blocking out the memory of the cat, blocking out the last glimmer of hope that had flickered within him. He went through the lowest point in his life. The winter settled in, harsh and unforgiving. The alley behind the McKinley Tower became a desolate landscape of ice and snow, a treacherous maze of frozen puddles and biting winds. The ginger cat, thinner now, its fur matted with grime and frost, continued its nightly vigil. It had no concept of time, no understanding of why the quiet man had disappeared. But instinct, a deep-seated loyalty born of shared moments of kindness, kept it returning to the bench, night after night. It remembered the scent of rice wine, the small offering of food, the gentle presence that had, for a brief time, eased the harshness of its existence. The cat's hunting grounds had become increasingly barren. The dumpsters yielded fewer scraps, the other strays were more aggressive, the cold sapped its strength. It had grown weaker, its movements slower, its once bright eyes now clouded with a mixture of hunger and despair. It often huddled beneath the discarded cardboard, shivering uncontrollably, its body racked with coughs. It dreamed of warmth, of food, of the quiet man's hand placing a small pile of rice on the cold concrete. One night, a particularly brutal blizzard swept through the city. The wind howled through the alley, whipping the snow into a blinding frenzy. The cat, its fur soaked and frozen, struggled to find shelter. It sought refuge beneath the bench, but the wind offered little protection. It was close to giving up. Its body was numb, its spirit broken. It lay curled in a tight ball, its eyes closed, waiting for the inevitable. It was ready to surrender to the cold, to the darkness, to the endless hunger that had gnawed at it for so long. But then, through the howling wind, it thought it heard a sound. A faint, familiar sound. The crunch of footsteps on snow. It lifted its head, its ears twitching, its eyes straining to see through the swirling snow. It saw a figure, blurry and indistinct, approaching slowly, cautiously. The figure was bundled in a heavy coat, a scarf wrapped around its face, but there was something familiar about its gait, about its posture. The cat let out a weak, raspy meow, a desperate plea for help, for recognition. The figure stopped, hesitated, then continued its approach. As it drew closer, the cat recognized the scent. The faint, lingering aroma of rice wine, mixed with the familiar scent of the quiet man. Couldn't be. It was impossible. But the scent was undeniable. The figure knelt down, its face still obscured by the scarf. A gloved hand reached out, tentatively, hesitantly. "Kitty?" A voice whispered, muffled by the wind and the scarf. The cat, mustering the last of its strength, pushed itself forward, its body trembling. It nuzzled the gloved hand, a faint purr rumbling in its chest. It was him. He had come back. Arthur Harris had spent weeks battling his demons. The sight of the stray cat, that snowy evening, had been a turning point. It had shaken him out of his stupor, forced him to confront the reality of his situation, the consequences of his inaction. He'd finally opened the mail, faced the overdue bills, the eviction notice. He'd swallowed his pride and called a social worker, a number he'd found on a crumpled flyer tucked into his mailbox. He'd started attending a support group for unemployed men, sharing his story, listening to the stories of others, realizing he wasn't alone. It had been a slow, painful process, a gradual climb out of the abyss. He'd found a part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store, a far cry from his security guard position, but it was something. It was a start. But the thought of the ginger cat, the cat he'd abandoned, had continued to haunt him. He'd felt a profound sense of guilt, a deep-seated responsibility for the creature's well-being. He knew he had to go back to see if it was still there, to try to make amends. He'd waited for a particularly harsh night, a night when he knew the cat would be most vulnerable, most in need. He'd bundled up, prepared a small bag of cat food, and filled a thermos with warm broth. He'd walked the familiar route to the McKinley Tower, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of fear and hope churning in his stomach. He'd found the cat huddled beneath the bench, barely alive. The sight of it, so thin, so frail, so utterly defeated, had brought tears to his eyes. He'd knelt down, spoken its name. He hadn't realized he'd given it a name, but Kitty seemed to fit, and reached out his hand. The cat's response, the faint purr, the nuzzle against his glove, had been a balm to his wounded soul. It was a sign of forgiveness, of acceptance, of unconditional love. He gently scooped up the cat, wrapping it in his scarf, holding it close to his chest. He'd carried it home, the cat purring weakly, its body trembling against his. He'd made a bed for it in a cardboard box lined with old towels, placed it near the radiator, offered it warm broth and small pieces of cat food. The cat had eaten slowly, weakly, but with a growing appetite. He'd spent the night watching over it, stroking its fur, whispering words of comfort, of apology. He'd realized, with a sudden clarity, that he needed the cat as much as the cat needed him. They were two lost souls, two survivors, who had found each other in the darkness. The next day, he'd taken the cat to a veterinarian. The news wasn't good. The cat was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from a respiratory infection. It was also old, much older than Arthur had realized. The vet had given him medication, instructions for care, and a grim prognosis. The cat might recover, but it would require constant care, and its life would likely be shortened. Arthur hadn't hesitated. He'd taken the cat home, determined to do everything he could to make its remaining days comfortable, to repay the loyalty, the companionship, the silent understanding that the cat had given him. The apartment building still didn't officially allow pets, but Arthur didn't care. He'd risk eviction, anything to keep the cat with him. He'd become its protector, its provider, its friend. The cat, which Arthur now officially called Lucky, slowly began to recover. It gained weight, its fur regained some of its luster, its eyes regained some of their brightness. It still coughed, still struggled to move sometimes, but it was alive, and it was loved. Arthur's life had changed irrevocably. He was no longer the quiet, invisible man he'd once been. He had a purpose, a responsibility, a companion. He still struggled with his own demons, with the grief of losing Sarah, with the challenges of unemployment, but he was no longer alone. He'd found a connection, a bond, that had transcended the barriers of species, of language, of circumstance. He'd found a love that was both simple and profound, a love that had saved him from the brink of despair. The ending is bittersweet. Lucky's health is fragile, and Arthur knows he won't have him forever. But they have each other now, and that's what matters. Arthur has learned the value of connection, of caring for another being, and of accepting help when it's needed. He's no longer entirely alone, and he's found a measure of peace and purpose in his quiet, unexpected companionship with a stray ginger cat. The rice wine is no longer a symbol of loneliness, but a shared ritual, a toast to their unlikely, enduring friendship. He continues to visit the spot he met Lucky for a little while, until he finally move on. The widow grieved in silence, but when a pregnant cat arrived on her doorstep, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Emily's well-tended garden, painting the vibrant blooms in hues of gold and crimson. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the old oak tree, carrying the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the distant chirping of crickets. Emily, a woman of quiet grace and gentle wisdom, sat on her porch swing, a steaming cup of tea warming her hands. Retirement had brought a peaceful rhythm to her life, filled with gardening, reading, and the occasional visit from her grown children. Yet, a subtle ache of loneliness lingered in her heart, a void left by the passing of her beloved husband, John, 2 years prior. As she watched a hummingbird flit between the blossoms, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. A small, tortoiseshell cat with wary eyes and a slightly matted coat was cautiously making its way across the lawn. Emily, a lifelong lover of animals, felt a pang of sympathy for the creature. It was clearly a stray, its ribs showing slightly beneath its fur. But there was something else about the cat that tugged at Emily's heartstrings. A certain roundness to its belly, a subtle sway in its walk. Setting down her tea, Emily rose from the swing and slowly approached the cat, her voice soft and reassuring. "Hello there, sweetheart," she murmured. "Are you lost, little one?" The cat paused, its amber eyes fixed on Emily with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. It took a tentative step forward, then another, drawn by the kindness in Emily's voice and the gentle aura that surrounded her. Emily knelt down, extending a hand slowly. "Come here, darling. I won't hurt you." The cat hesitated for a moment. Then, as if sensing Emily's genuine concern, it crept closer, allowing Emily to gently stroke its head. The fur was soft beneath her fingers, and Emily could feel the faint tremor of the cat's body as it leaned into her touch. As she stroked the cat, Emily's suspicions were confirmed. The gentle curve of its belly was unmistakable. This sweet creature was expecting. A wave of protectiveness washed over Emily. She couldn't bear the thought of this vulnerable mother-to-be fending for herself on the streets. "Oh, you poor dear," she whispered, her heart aching for the cat's plight. "You need a safe place to have your babies." An idea bloomed in Emily's mind, a spark of warmth chasing away the lingering loneliness. "Come with me," she said softly, rising to her feet. "I'll take care of you." The cat seemed to understand, following Emily as she walked back towards the house. As they reached the porch, Emily paused, a smile gracing her lips. "I think I'll call you Flower," she said, gazing at the delicate blossoms adorning her porch. "Welcome home, Flower." Leading Flower into the house, Emily felt a flutter of nervous excitement. It had been years since she'd shared her home with an animal, and she hoped this new arrangement would work out. Her late husband, John, had been allergic to cats, so their home had always been pet-free. Now, with John gone, Emily felt a renewed freedom to explore the companionship of a furry friend. Flower, hesitant at first, cautiously stepped across the threshold. Her amber eyes, wide with curiosity, scanned the living room, taking in the floral wallpaper, the antique furniture, and the cozy fireplace. Emily, sensing her apprehension, spoke in soothing tones. "It's all right, Flower. Make yourself at home." To Emily's surprise, Flower adapted quickly. She explored the house with a growing sense of confidence, sniffing at the furniture, rubbing against the table legs, and even venturing a tentative paw onto the plush armchair. Emily watched with amusement, her heart warming at the sight of this timid creature gradually relaxing in her new surroundings. Emily prepared a soft bed for Flower in a quiet corner of the living room, placing a cozy blanket and a small, plush toy in the basket. Flower, after a brief inspection, curled up in the bed with a contented sigh. Emily smiled, relieved that her new companion seemed to approve of her accommodations. Over the next few days, Flower settled into her new life with remarkable ease. She proved to be an affectionate cat, often rubbing against Emily's legs or jumping onto her lap for a cuddle. Emily, in turn, showered Flower with love and attention, brushing her fur, playing with her, and talking to her in soft, gentle tones. One evening, as Emily sat reading by the fireplace, Flower hopped onto the sofa and curled up beside her, purring softly. Emily reached out to stroke her fur, marveling at the bond that was already forming between them. "You're a good girl, Flower," she murmured, a sense of peace settling over her. The loneliness that had haunted her since John's passing seemed to dissipate in the presence of this gentle creature. Flower, with her quiet companionship and affectionate nature, had brought a renewed sense of warmth and joy into Emily's life. As Emily drifted off to sleep that night, with Flower curled up at the foot of the bed, she knew she had made the right decision in welcoming this stray cat into her home. The following morning, Emily woke to the sound of gentle purring. Flower was curled up beside her, her amber eyes gazing at Emily with a look of quiet contentment. Emily smiled, reaching out to stroke the soft fur. "Good morning, Flower," she whispered. "Did you sleep well?" Flower responded with a soft meow and a nudge of her head against Emily's hand. As Emily got out of bed, Flower followed her, weaving between her legs and purring louder. Emily chuckled. "Someone's hungry, I see." After a breakfast of scrambled eggs for herself and a bowl of creamy milk for Flower, Emily decided it was time to take her new companion to the veterinarian. She wanted to confirm her suspicions about Flower's pregnancy and ensure the cat was in good health. Dr. Anderson, the local veterinarian, was a kind, jovial man with a gentle touch and a genuine love for animals. He greeted Emily and Flower with a warm smile. "Well, hello there, little one," he said, gently examining Flower. "You're a beautiful girl, aren't you?" After a thorough examination, Dr. Anderson confirmed Emily's suspicions. "Yes, she's definitely expecting," he said, a smile in his eyes. "And by the looks of it, she's carrying quite a few little ones." He estimated that Flower was about halfway through her pregnancy and would likely give birth in about 4 weeks. Emily left the clinic with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She was thrilled at the prospect of welcoming a litter of kittens into her home, but she also felt a sense of responsibility. She wanted to ensure Flower had everything she needed for a safe and comfortable delivery. Upon returning home, Emily set about preparing for the kitten's arrival. She cleared out a spacious wicker basket and lined it with soft blankets and towels. She purchased kitten milk replacer, feeding bottles, and a small heating pad, just in case the newborns needed extra warmth. She even picked up a few toys, envisioning the kittens batting at colorful balls of yarn and chasing after feathered mice. As the days turned into weeks, Emily watched Flower closely, noting the subtle changes in her body and behavior. Flower's belly grew larger with each passing day, and she spent more time sleeping and grooming. Emily made sure Flower had plenty of nutritious food and fresh water, and she spoke to her in soothing tones, reassuring her that she was safe and loved. The anticipation in the house was palpable. Emily couldn't wait to meet the new additions to her family. She knew that the arrival of these kittens would bring a new dimension of joy and love into her life, filling her home with the sounds of tiny meows and playful purrs. With the kittens' arrival imminent, Flower's behavior shifted noticeably. She became more restless, pacing around the house and frequently inspecting the wicker basket Emily had prepared. One afternoon, Emily found Flower rearranging the blankets in the basket, meticulously pushing and prodding them with her paws until she seemed satisfied with their arrangement. "Making yourself comfortable, Flower?" Emily asked with a smile. Flower looked up at her with a soft meow, as if to say, "Yes, this is perfect." Emily observed Flower's nesting instincts with fascination. She had read about this behavior in cats, but witnessing it firsthand was a different experience altogether. It was as if Flower was preparing a haven, a sanctuary for her unborn kittens. As the days passed, Flower's bond with Emily deepened. She often sought out Emily's company, curling up on her lap while she read or rubbing against her legs while she cooked. Emily, in turn, showered Flower with affection, talking to her softly and stroking her fur. She felt a deep connection to this gentle creature, a sense of shared anticipation for the upcoming birth. One evening, while Emily was preparing dinner, Flower jumped onto the kitchen counter and began sniffing at the bowl of chopped vegetables. Emily chuckled. "Hungry, are you? Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you." She set down a small dish of tuna, Flower's favorite treat, and watched as the cat devoured it with gusto. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Flower," Emily said softly, stroking the cat's head. Flower purred in response, her eyes half closed in contentment. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Emily made sure Flower was always warm and comfortable. She placed a heating pad in the wicker basket and draped a soft blanket over it. Flower seemed to appreciate the extra warmth, often curling up in the basket and purring contentedly. Emily found herself counting down the days until the kitten's arrival. She imagined the tiny creatures, their eyes closed, their fur soft as velvet, nuzzling against their mother's warm body. She couldn't wait to hold them in her hands, to feel their tiny hearts beating against her palm. The prospect of new life filled her with a sense of hope and joy, a welcome antidote to the quiet loneliness that had sometimes crept into her life. The much-anticipated day arrived with a quiet snowfall. Large, fluffy flakes drifted down from the sky, blanketing the neighborhood in a pristine white. Inside, a different kind of anticipation hung in the air. Flower, restless and panting, had taken up permanent residence in the wicker basket. Emily, a mixture of excitement and nerves bubbling within her, kept a watchful eye on the expectant mother. As the morning progressed, Flower's contractions became more frequent and intense. Emily, remembering the instructions Dr. Anderson had given her, prepared a warm, damp towel and placed it in the basket. She spoke to Flower in soothing tones, stroking her fur and offering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Flower," she murmured. "Just a little longer now." Flower, her eyes half closed, purred softly in response, her body trembling with each contraction. Emily watched in awe, marveling at the strength and resilience of this creature. One by one, the kittens began to arrive. First came a tiny ginger tabby, followed by a sleek black kitten, then a fluffy calico, and finally a mischievous-looking Siamese. Emily, her heart overflowing with joy, watched as Flower diligently cleaned each newborn, her maternal instincts kicking in with fierce protectiveness. The sight of the tiny creatures, their eyes still closed, their bodies wriggling with newfound life, brought tears to Emily's eyes. She carefully lifted each kitten, one by one, marveling at their softness and fragility. Their tiny meows filled the room, a symphony of new life that echoed through the quiet house. Flower, exhausted but radiant, purred contentedly as she nursed her newborns. Emily watched the scene unfold, a sense of peace and wonder washing over her. The arrival of these kittens had transformed her home, filling it with a warmth and vibrancy she hadn't felt in years. As the snow continued to fall outside, Emily curled up on the sofa, the wicker basket nestled beside her. She watched Flower and her kittens, their gentle breathing and soft purrs creating a lullaby that soothed her soul. In that moment, surrounded by the miracle of new life, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. Flower and her kittens had not only brought joy into her life, but they had also reminded her of the beauty and resilience of the natural world, a world where even the smallest creature could bring immense love and happiness. The first few weeks of the kittens' lives were a whirlwind of activity. Flower, ever the devoted mother, barely left the wicker basket, her time consumed by nursing, grooming, and keeping her brood warm and safe. Emily, in turn, became a doting grandmother, marveling at the kitten's growth and development. Each kitten had a distinct personality. The ginger tabby, whom Emily named Rusty, was the boldest, always the first to venture out of the basket and explore his surroundings. The sleek black kitten, aptly named Midnight, was the most cautious, preferring to observe from a safe distance before venturing into the unknown. The fluffy calico, christened Patches, was the cuddliest, often found nestled in Emily's lap or purring contentedly on her shoulder. And the Siamese, with his striking blue eyes and mischievous demeanor, earned the name Mischief. Flower, despite her maternal instincts, faced the challenges of motherhood with unwavering dedication. She tirelessly nursed her kittens, ensuring each one received their fill of nourishing milk. She meticulously groomed them, keeping their fur clean and soft, and she fiercely protected them, her amber eyes constantly scanning for any potential threats. However, motherhood wasn't without its difficulties. One evening, Emily noticed that Flower seemed distressed. She was pacing around the basket, meowing anxiously, and her kittens were crying more than usual. Upon closer inspection, Emily realized that Flower wasn't producing enough milk to satisfy her hungry brood. Concerned, Emily called Dr. Anderson, who advised her to supplement Flower's milk with kitten milk replacer. Emily rushed to the store and returned with bottles, formula, and a small heating pad to keep the milk warm. She carefully fed each kitten, marveling at their eagerness to suckle and their rapid gulping. Flower, initially hesitant about this human intervention, soon realized that Emily was helping her care for her kittens. She allowed Emily to feed her babies, even nudging them towards the bottles with her nose. The shared responsibility of caring for the kittens forged an even stronger bond between Emily and Flower. Despite the challenges, Flower thrived in her role as a mother. Her love for her kittens was evident in every gentle lick, every protective nuzzle, every soft purr that vibrated through the wicker basket. Emily, witnessing this maternal devotion, felt her heart swell with admiration and affection for both Flower and her adorable offspring. As the weeks passed, the kittens grew rapidly, transforming from helpless newborns into curious and playful explorers. Their eyes opened, revealing a kaleidoscope of colors: Rusty's bright green, Midnight's deep gold, Patches' mismatched blue and green, and Mischief's striking sapphire blue. Their first attempts at walking were wobbly and uncoordinated, their tiny legs splaying out in all directions. Emily would chuckle as they tumbled over each other, their playful meows filling the air. Soon, however, they gained confidence, scampering around the house with increasing agility. Rusty, true to his adventurous spirit, was the first to climb the stairs, his tiny claws finding purchase on the carpet. Midnight, ever cautious, followed close behind, his eyes wide with apprehension. Patches, the cuddliest of the bunch, preferred to be carried, her soft fur brushing against Emily's cheek as she ascended the steps. And Mischief, living up to his name, discovered the joy of batting at Emily's dangling earrings and chasing after her shoelaces. The kitten's playful antics brought endless amusement to Emily's life. She would spend hours watching them chase each other around the furniture, their tiny bodies a blur of motion. She would laugh as they pounced on imaginary prey, their tails twitching with excitement, and she would marvel at their boundless energy, their curiosity leading them to explore every nook and cranny of the house. Flower, while still fiercely protective of her offspring, allowed them more freedom to explore. She would watch them with a watchful eye, occasionally intervening with a gentle nudge or a soft meow to guide their explorations. She seemed to enjoy watching them play, her tail swishing gently as she observed their antics. The bond between Emily and the kittens grew stronger with each passing day. She would spend hours playing with them, dangling toys and rolling balls of yarn across the floor. She would hold them close, their soft fur warming her hands and their gentle purrs soothing her soul. One evening, as Emily sat by the fireplace reading, Patches climbed onto her lap and curled up contentedly, her purring a gentle rumble against Emily's chest. Emily smiled, stroking the kitten's soft fur. "You're such a sweetheart, Patches," she murmured. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the gentle purring of a kitten, Emily felt a profound sense of contentment. Flower and her kittens had brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy into her life, filling her home with laughter, love, and the endless wonder of new beginnings. Life, as Emily had learned over her many years, rarely follows a predictable path. Just as she was settling into a comfortable routine with Flower and her kittens, fate threw a curveball that disrupted their peaceful existence. It started with Rusty. The once boisterous kitten became lethargic, refusing to play and sleeping more than usual. Emily noticed he wasn't eating as much and his usually bright eyes seemed dull. A motherly instinct, honed from years of caring for her own children, told her something was wrong. With a growing sense of dread, Emily bundled Rusty into his carrier and rushed him to Dr. Anderson's clinic. The vet examined Rusty thoroughly, his brow furrowed in concern. After what seemed like an eternity, he delivered the diagnosis: feline infectious peritonitis, FIP, a devastating and often fatal viral disease. Emily's heart sank. FIP was a cruel disease, known for its rapid progression and lack of effective treatment options. Dr. Anderson explained that while there were supportive measures they could take to manage Rusty's symptoms and keep him comfortable, the prognosis was grim. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened to the vet's words. She had grown so attached to Rusty, his playful spirit and boundless energy bringing so much joy into her life. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Returning home with Rusty, Emily felt a heavy weight settle upon her shoulders. She kept a constant vigil by his side, offering him warm milk, soft blankets, and endless cuddles. Flower, sensing her kitten's distress, stayed close by, grooming him gently and purring softly. The other kittens, unaware of the gravity of the situation, continued their playful antics. But Emily found it difficult to share their joy, her heart heavy with worry for Rusty. She tried to remain optimistic, clinging to the hope that Rusty would somehow defy the odds and recover. But as the days passed, Rusty's condition worsened. He grew weaker, his breathing becoming labored, his once vibrant eyes now clouded with pain. Emily knew the time was drawing near to say goodbye. One evening, with Flower curled up beside him, Rusty took his last breath. Emily held him close, tears streaming down her face as she whispered words of love and farewell. The silence that followed was deafening, the absence of his tiny purr a gaping hole in her heart. The loss of Rusty cast a pall over the household. Flower, grieving the loss of her kitten, became withdrawn, her usual playful demeanor replaced by a quiet sadness. Emily, her own grief compounded by Flower's sorrow, struggled to find solace. The unexpected turn of events had shaken Emily to her core, forcing her to confront the fragility of life and the pain of loss. But amidst the grief, a new resolve emerged. She would cherish the remaining kittens even more, showering them with love and ensuring their health and happiness. And she would continue to care for Flower, offering her comfort and support as they navigated this difficult time together. The weeks following Rusty's death were a time of quiet mourning for Emily and Flower. The house, once filled with the joyful sounds of kitten play, now echoed with a somber stillness. Emily found herself moving through her days with a heavy heart, the memory of Rusty's playful spirit a constant ache in her chest. Flower, too, seemed to carry the weight of grief. She spent much of her time curled up in the wicker basket, her gaze distant and her purrs muted. The remaining kittens, sensing their mother's sadness, became less boisterous, their play subdued. Emily, determined to break the cycle of sorrow, made a conscious effort to bring joy back into their lives. She showered the remaining kittens with affection, engaging them in playful games and offering them extra cuddles. She spent more time with Flower, brushing her fur, talking to her softly, and offering her comforting words. Slowly, life began to regain its rhythm. Midnight, Patches, and Mischief, resilient in their youth, gradually rediscovered their playful spirit. Their laughter, though tinged with a hint of sadness, once again filled the house. Flower, responding to Emily's love and the kitten's renewed energy, began to emerge from her shell of grief. One sunny afternoon, Emily decided to take Flower and the kittens to the local park. She packed a picnic basket, filled with treats for both the cats and herself, and set off on their adventure. The park was alive with the sights and sounds of spring. Children laughed as they chased each other across the grassy fields. Dogs barked playfully as they fetched frisbees, and birds sang merrily from the branches of the trees. Emily spread out a blanket beneath a large oak tree and watched as the kittens explored their new surroundings. Midnight, cautious as ever, stayed close to Emily, his eyes wide with curiosity. Patches, the social butterfly, made friends with a young girl who was delighted to stroke her soft fur. And Mischief, true to his name, chased butterflies and climbed trees with reckless abandon. Flower, basking in the warm sunshine, seemed to rediscover her playful spirit. She chased after a rolling pine cone, her tail swishing playfully. She rolled in the grass, her fur catching the sunlight. And she even engaged in a mock chase with Mischief, her maternal instincts momentarily forgotten in the joy of the moment. As Emily watched Flower and her kittens frolic in the park, a sense of peace washed over her. The pain of Rusty's loss was still present, but it no longer consumed her. She realized that grief, like life itself, was a journey, a process of healing and acceptance. The day at the park marked a turning point for Emily and Flower. They had faced adversity together, mourned together, and now they were healing together. The bond between them, forged through love and loss, had grown even stronger, a testament to the enduring power of companionship and the resilience of the human-animal connection. Life, with its gentle rhythm and unexpected turns, continued to unfold in Emily's cozy bungalow. The kittens, now approaching adulthood, had blossomed into unique and captivating companions. Midnight, with his sleek black fur and golden eyes, remained the cautious observer, often found perched on a windowsill, gazing out at the world with a contemplative air. Patches, the calico cuddle bug, still sought out Emily's lap for a warm nap or a gentle stroking session. And Mischief, the mischievous Siamese, continued to live up to his name, his playful antics bringing laughter and chaos into Emily's life. Flower, now a mature matriarch, exuded an air of quiet contentment. She had fully embraced her role as mother and protector, guiding her offspring with gentle nudges and soft meows. Her bond with Emily remained as strong as ever, their shared experiences of love, loss, and resilience forging an unbreakable connection. Emily, surrounded by her feline family, felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known was possible. The loneliness that had once haunted her had vanished, replaced by a warmth and vibrancy that permeated every corner of her home. The kitten's playful antics and Flower's gentle companionship filled her days with laughter and love, reminding her of the simple joys of life. One warm summer evening, Emily sat on her porch swing, a cup of tea in her hand and Flower curled up on her lap. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting a golden glow over the garden. The air was filled with the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the chirping of crickets, a symphony of nature that soothed her soul. As she watched the fireflies dance among the flowers, Emily reflected on the journey she had taken with Flower and her kittens. The unexpected encounter, the joys of motherhood, the challenges they had faced, and the resilience they had shown. All these experiences had woven a tapestry of love and companionship that enriched her life beyond measure. A gentle purr from Flower brought a smile to Emily's lips. She looked down at the cat, her amber eyes glowing in the twilight. "We've come a long way, haven't we, Flower?" she murmured, stroking the soft fur. Flower, in response, nuzzled her head against Emily's hand, a silent affirmation of their shared journey. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of companionship, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had found a family in the most unexpected of places, a family that had brought love, laughter, and a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of life. As the stars twinkled in the night sky, Emily closed her eyes, the gentle purring of Flower lulling her into a peaceful slumber. The image of her feline family, curled up together in a warm embrace, filled her dreams, a testament to the enduring power of love and the magic of finding a home in the heart of another.